It's 10 a.m. on the East Coast, which means Wall Street has been open for about 30 minutes or so. And we're taking a look at how the markets are reacting to President Biden's speech a little earlier. He assured the American people that the nation's banking system is safe following the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank. And, as the markets do, they go up and down. They started sort of down. They've dipped or they've slid back up again. We'll watch it throughout the day, though, because I expect, as Vlad would say, that there would be gyrations in the market. That's a Vlad word.
Sounds like a Vlad word.
Yeah. Mr. Biden said the American taxpayers won't be on the hook for any losses. Bank management will be fired and investors will not be protected. And he also called for Congress to restore banking regulations first implemented after the 2008 financial crisis.
During the Obama-Biden administration, we put in place tough requirements on banks like Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank, including the Dodd-Frank law to make sure that the crisis we saw in 2008 would not happen again. Unfortunately, the last administration rolled back some of these requirements. I'm going to ask Congress and the banking regulators to strengthen the rules for banks to make it less likely this kind of bank failure would happen again, and to protect American jobs and small businesses.
So Weijia Jiang is following all of this from the White House. She was listening in. Weijia, thanks for joining us again. So what might those regulations look like?
Well, it just depends on what Congress is willing to do, right? Because even though the president said right there that he was going to nudge them, it really is not something that he can enforce when it comes to using his executive action. So lawmakers will have to look at various options to see, how they can put more pressure on these banks and hold those responsible for this accountable, because the president vowed he would do that anyone, who is in a manager position, anyone responsible for this collapse, he vowed would be fired. As far as the details, though, this is just the beginning of the conversation, so it's unclear exactly what could be on the table, but the president's saying also that, that we will stop at nothing, that this is just the start to make sure that these institutions are protected.
Weijia, could reinstating that banking regulation get bipartisan support in Congress?
Well, it remains to be seen. Again, I think this, hasn't happened for quite some time, for over a decade. And so there were lessons learned then, which is why those regulations were put in place. But right now, it depends, because Republicans, on the one hand, some have already criticized the president and warned that, a bailout should not ever be on the option, that taxpayer dollars should never be wound up in this. And so remember, this just happened on Friday. So, lawmakers, I don't think have even had time to have those conversations. Of course, they've been briefed about the goings on and what the administration did to respond. But in terms of being proactive, I think those are conversations that are just now happening.
So what President Biden really wanted to do here was really sort of calm people, right? Because as I understand it, the Silicon Valley Bank, it's big. It's kind of like the biggest bank that I think we never heard of. But their focus is really on startups, not on regular people like us. And so There is a concern, though, when you hear, you hear the headlines, massive bank collapse over a weekend. There's a concern that there's going to be a ripple effect. And is that really what this announcement was all about?
Well, it doesn't affect everyday people like us in so far as who's the main depositors. Mm-hmm. But if those startups can't pay their bills and can't pay their bankrolls, certainly it does impact, everyday workers. And that is one of the reasons why, there was such quick action to make sure those depositors had access to money. The other concern is that there would be a widespread panic, right? That people would see what happened here and that they too would go start withdrawing their money from their banks, which is exactly what happened here, because there was, information that this particular bank was vulnerable. They saw a huge amount of withdrawals at the same time, and then those bonds that are generally stable were not anymore. And so the bank had to, make money, not make money, but have money, have liquid. And so when they sold off billions of dollars, it impacted the entire system and led to this collapse. And so I think that's precisely why, Anne-Marie, the president stressed many times in his remarks to stay calm. He tried to reassure people that in general, the American bank system is safe, is protected, and that, you know, their money, if they want to deposit it, will be there when they want to go and withdraw it.
Weijia, we're seeing a live picture of the president right now. Why is he going to San Diego today?
So this was a very well-timed coincidence because the president is heading to California. Of course, the majority of the companies impacted by this banking collapse are there in Silicon Valley, but this trip was already on the books. He's going there to meet with the prime ministers of Australia and the UK to talk about, among many other things, defense and military, because of course the president has been talking at length about China and how to compete with China. So I imagine they will talk about potential deals that they could make, potential ways that they could combat any competition from there. He has a lot on his agenda for this trip. It's not just meeting with those foreign leaders and having remarks there and hopefully answering some questions, but he will also be visiting this site of the mass shooting that happened over Lunar New Year at Monterey Park to talk about gun reform. And then he'll head to Las Vegas to close out his trip to talk about prescription drugs and pricing. So he has a lot on his plate. And again, this was a coincidence that he is in fact going to California. There's nothing official added to his schedule yet, but that could change because certainly this banking story is still very much developing.
All right, Weijia, thanks so much.
Sure.